In Whitman's 1855 Leaves of Grass, he is in part exploring the look and meaning of Americanness, that is, nation. He posits that, like the leaves of grass, nation can be described but not necessarily defined. This he makes clear early in the work when answering the query of the child who has asked, "What is grass?" Whitman the poet confesses, "I do not know what it is any more than he." And in the contemplation that follows in lines 96 through 100 of the poem, Whitman's imagery ties the mystery of the grass to the mystery of nation. Or I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphics, and it means sprouting alike in broad zones and narrow zones, growing among black folks as among whites. Canuck, Tuckahoe, Congressman Cuff, I give them the same, I receive them the same. The mystery of nation and identity explored in Whitman's poem suggests difference, but a beauty in and a need to celebrate difference, even an ultimate oneness that is born out of difference, as illustrated in the following lines. Of every hue and caste am I, of every rank and religion, a farmer, mechanic, artist, gentleman, sailor, Quaker, prisoner, fancy man, rowdy, lawyer, physician, priest. I resist anything better than my own diversity. Whitman's poetic treatise is published 2 years after Solomon Northup's narrative account of his 12 years in bondage. But Whitman's contemplations provide a useful ideological backdrop for contextualizing Northup's tribulations within the framework of nation and national identity. If we consider Northup's account of his early years and his life before he is tricked into bondage, we are offered a picture of difference and diversity that resonates with Whitman's poetic account. Northup's description of his family and lineage might simply be seen as part of Whitman's diverse American identity. As far back as I have been able to ascertain, my ancestors on the paternal side were slaves in Rhode Island, Northup writes. They belonged to a family by the name of Northup, one of whom, removing to the state of New York, settled at Hoosick in Rensselaer County. He brought with him Mentus Northup, my father. On the death of this gentleman, which must have occurred some 50 years ago, my father became free, having been emancipated by a direction in his will. Although not depicted in the 2013 film version of the narrative, this diversity is painted even broader with Northup's account of his wife and her ancestry, and the remembrance of his own mother's bloodline. On Christmas Day, 1829, he writes, I was married to Ann Hampton, a colored girl then living in the vicinity of our residence. She is not able to determine the exact line of her descent, but the blood of 3 races mingles in her veins. It is difficult to tell whether the red, white, or black predominates. The union of them all, however, in her origin has given her a singular but pleasing expression, such as is rarely to be seen. Though somewhat resembling, yet she cannot properly be styled a quadroon. A class to which I have omitted to mention my mother belonged. As a free man, Northup earned income as a farmer, a timber transporter, a violinist. In 1841, he and his wife moved to Saratoga to work at a boarding house. At the time of his misadventure into the realm of slave, Northup had not conceived of himself as unprotected, unrecognized within the realm of the law. He was clear that he was black and that blacks south of the demarcation line were enslaved en masse. But he thought himself a free man by all rights, living the simple life of most in his class. He explains, "Thus far, the history of my life presents nothing whatever unusual, nothing but the common hopes and loves and labors of an obscure colored man, making his humble progress in the world." Northup's narrative is a kind of reverse slave narrative, especially if we consider it in light of one of the most well-known of slave narratives, and that is Frederick Douglass's 1845 publication, published in fact during the period of Solomon's enslavement. Whereas Douglass escapes from south to north, specifically from Baltimore, Northup is led from north to south, specifically to Baltimore. Douglass seeks freedom and citizenship in his daring escape. Northup's his abductors, in fact, seek his enslavement and thus a revocation of his presumed citizenship. Here, however, we are reminded of Martin Delany's argument in his 1854 treatise, Political Destiny of the Colored Race on the American Continent. Delany argues that because of their status or lack of in the legal and political realm of the U.S., blacks have no point of entry, no claim, that is, to citizenship or the rights thereof. He argues the following: no one, then, can delegate to another a power he never possessed. That is, he cannot give an agency in that which he never had a right. Consequently, the colored man in the United States, being deprived of the right of inherent sovereignty, cannot confer a suffrage, because he has none to confer. Therefore, where there is no suffrage, there can neither be nor safety for the disenfranchised. While whites are free to traverse the geographical expanse of the United States with no threat to their citizenship or freedom, blacks are subject to an intra-national structure that leaves them, even when free, always the presumed outsider. As founding father Thomas Jefferson makes clear in Query 14, the inaugural vision of the nation is one that consists of the untainted superior Anglo-Saxon blood. Northup's fall into the state of slave, a scheme that could in fact be imagined and initiated in the free North, speaks to the otherness of non-whites in the national sphere. More despairing, Northup's nightmare reveals the involuntary identity shift that can leave a once free man remanded to bondage with no legal discourse, and this within the confines of the national democratic domain. In our classroom here in Atlanta, let's consider how Northrup's experience speaks to text of his era that we are reading. Consider Melville's Benito Cereno, Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, and Davis's Life in the Iron Mills, for example. Do these works reflect similar or contrasting presumptions about nation and national identity than that conveyed in the story of Northrup's plight? Similarly, for Mind students, I'd like you to consider how Northrup's story reflects these themes as they are conveyed in your readings this semester. Is the U.S. today still bound to its ethnocentric origin? How do we move from the black-white out in binary of this nation's origins to a 21st century transnationalism? What does postbellum literature and discourse tell us about this proclaimed transition? Finally, while the movie makes only a small number of deviations from the text, consider the significance of those changes. For instance, why are blacks of noticeably diverse racial heritage not represented as such in the film? Why is Northrup's description of a certain slave master represented in the movie in a clearly contrasting light? What is the significance of the film version's suggestion of a sexual attraction between Northup and Eliza when there is no such allusion in the text version? Take any of these questions I have posited here and begin your own contemplations and conversations on the film.